When learning to practice mindfulness, the first thing most people notice is how noisy, busy, and uncontrollable the mind is. When I first started to meditate, staying focused on my breath for 5 seconds seemed pretty amazing, as my mind was so busy and kept luring me away from this moment. This was a source of great frustration for me, and meditation became grave and dreary at times. A few years later, I was listening to a talk from a great Zen teacher about leaving and returning. He was describing what happens when we bring attention to the present moment, but are then drawn away by the mind into some fantasy. What he said was that meditation is about coming back to this moment, again and again. So we need not to be discouraged when the mind draws us away. If you're even just 30 years old, you have probably spent at least 25 years or more engrossed in the mind's chatter, and expecting to change that habit in a day, a week, or a year is just the mind setting unrealistic goals. This is what your mind naturally does, but there is no need to listen to it. Instead, we can go beyond those expectations by becoming aware of them without getting caught up in them. This means just treating these thoughts like any other, noticing them and bringing our attention back to the present moment. Mindfulness is about being aware of our present moment experience with an attitude of openness and curiosity. So we just observe whatever arises rather than trying to get rid of what we hate and hang on to what we like. A narrow focus on peace or happiness leaves no room to experience the other emotions we face as a part of our daily lives. When expectations arise, just notice them, become aware of them as you would any other thought. See what happens when you acknowledge these thoughts and return your attention to the present moment. You may notice the mind creating the story of my practice and my progress, talking about how well or how badly you are doing. Treat this like any other story. Watch it come and go, and keep paying attention to this instant. In Zen, they often say when you do sitting meditation, just sit. Or when you do walking meditation, just walk. Sometimes this is the only instruction students get, and really it is all they need. Just sitting means sitting down with awareness and in the middle of everything that is going on around us, whether our mind is peaceful or not, whether we experience joyful feeling or not. This is very hard to do, as we are so used to trying to shape our experiences in accordance with our preferences, our likes and dislikes. When we practice mindfulness, we learn to go beyond these preferences. We treat feelings of anger and feelings of joy in the same way, which is the beginning of the end of struggling with emotions, of avoiding some and chasing others. Without this struggle, we can enjoy all aspects of life and things naturally become more peaceful. As we practice at home and in daily life, the mind is often keen to keep score of how mindful I am, which is quite funny. If we are thinking about how mindful we are being, we are lost in our heads, unaware that our practice has gone out of the window at that moment. The mind tries to keep track of the level of mindfulness and then projects that into the future to predict what will happen. But this future watching takes us out of now and makes things unnecessarily complicated. If we can start with just one mindful breath, that is very good. In fact, just one breath is all we can ever do. So be as mindful as possible for this breath, then forget about it and focus on the next breath. If you're walking, be aware of just one step, then leave it behind. If we start thinking, wow, I was really mindful on that last breath, my practice is getting really strong, we are already lost. This is what the mind does. It compares, analyzes, and evaluates. But in mindfulness, we can allow this part of the mind to have a rest. Instead, we can learn to observe this process without getting carried away by the mind's judgments. To do this, come back to the awareness of this breath, of this step. There is nothing more to it than that. Every time you realize you are lost in thought, come back to just one breath, just one step. In this breath, there is peace, there is quiet, even if the mind is noisy. So, as you go about your daily life, keep coming back to this breath and this step and see what happens. It will surprise you. Overcoming difficulty really means learning to be with difficulty, to accept it happily and peacefully. This is not something to work on, but it happens naturally when we are not lost in our minds, believing the thoughts that come and go. Whatever arises, all that we ever need to do is to bring our attention back to now, regardless of what distracted us. Expectations, projections, worries, comparisons, they are all thoughts. So treat them like any other thought. Notice them and return to the moment. This is far more effective than ignoring or trying to get rid of those thoughts, which are part of our experience at the moment. Instead, we can simply come back again and again to now. Anytime you get frustrated because you can't relax or your mind is too busy, mindfulness is too hard. Whatever the story may be, notice what your mind is telling you at that moment. What thoughts are you believing? Pain and confusion can only come from believing thoughts, which are often confusing and painful. Start to notice these thoughts and notice what happens when you believe them. This is the beginning of peace. Many people's minds tell them this story, but you can be mindful whether your mind is noisy or not. This is a bit like saying you are too unfit to do exercise. It will be challenging, but if you can maintain your practice over time, your mind will become more settled, more peaceful. Don't worry about the results. Just start today and practice without any idea of getting something from it. Mindfulness doesn't mean having a quiet mind. It means being aware of the mind without getting lost in it. So whatever your mind is like right now, just experience it. Your mind may be trying to get peace by practicing mindfulness, but this process of trying to get somewhere causes noise, so there can be no peace. If this is the case, you might feel anxious, stressed, or annoyed, and your mind may become frustrated at your apparent lack of progress. Just feel that anger, that frustration. Be with it without running from it or resisting it. Allow yourself to fully experience it. This brings you back to this moment instead of listening to your mind's story about why things should be peaceful. The point of mindfulness is to learn to observe thoughts instead of getting caught up in them. So try to allow thoughts to come and go without getting lost. When you do get lost, simply notice this and return to this instant.